Great. Let's start with the fact, I guess, Christmas is fast looming, scaringly so. And of course, I suppose really a time for families, really. However, not everyone is in that position, are they, Beth?
Absolutely not. And actually, I think that if we think about the original Christmas story, then it's not really just about families. It's about kind of hope for everybody, and whether you're in a family or not. And I think, yeah, that's what some people find hard about Christmas sometimes if they're not in a family and it doesn't feel relevant to them.
And, it's quite incredible, really, I suppose, to think that also, even the churches to a certain degree, maybe many of them, obviously it does depend upon what church you go to and who's in charge. But sometimes it's a bit exclusive, isn't it, as far as families are concerned? You can see all these families gathering. The services are very much aimed at this time of the year towards the families as well. So it can be quite an isolating time.
Yes, it can be. I think, well, I mean, that's why we exist as single friendly church, because 40% of the UK population is single. But actually, as you say, this isn't reflected in the churches. And a lot of churches are very focused on particularly young families with children. And so people who are single of all ages, and also maybe couples without children, often feel like it's not relevant to them, or that they don't feel included in the social life going on in the church.
Yeah, you alluded to some research that I guess you guys have been involved in doing. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so we've done lots of research over the years, but most recently we did a survey about Christmas, about single people's experience of Christmas, and we had almost 500 responses. And we found out that 80% of people actually do find, of single people, find some aspects of Christmas difficult, and 30% of people said that it was solely a difficult time, or they even dreaded Christmas.
So that difficulty is what exactly? Is it like loneliness and the fact that maybe they are recently split and away from family? Is that kind of like some of the rationale that sits behind that?
It's a bit of everything. I think a lot of people feel kind of it is a very lonely time of year, and that's not just because of Christmas Day, but also the period between Christmas and New Year. Almost half of people who responded to the survey said that the week between Christmas and New Year, where lots of things shut down and there's not much going on, is actually the most difficult time of year for them, and they feel very lonely, particularly when they see kind of maybe the perception that families are hanging out together and having a lovely cozy time. And if you don't have family, or if your family's really far away, then actually it can be a very lonely time, and there's no one to spend it with. And also, I think if you don't have children, and maybe that's something that you've longed for, then often the emphasis on children, particularly in church services, but also in Christmas films and things like that, can be just a painful reminder of the thing that you wanted that you haven't been able to have.
Yeah, I think it's all the sort of things that when you're in a family kind of like relationship or, environment, you forget so much of this stuff, don't you, really, and take it all very much for granted. The good news is that single friendly church is out there, and that's something that you're part of. Tell us a little bit about how that's come about and what you do, your role, and how you can help, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Single Friendly Church was set up after we did an original survey of over 3,000 single Christians, finding out about their experience of church and how they felt about being single as a Christian. And the results showed that a lot of people, did feel happy in their singleness or felt accepted by the church, but they did feel excluded or isolated or invisible in their churches. So we realized that a lot of things needed to be done. And so that's why we set up, and we have all sorts of resources and training, and we have an audit that churches can do. And it's about kind of breaking down the idea that this is this huge problem, and actually thinking, well, actually there are steps that we can take, little practical changes that we can make in different areas of church life and in our individual actions to make it a more inclusive place for single people of all ages and stages.
So is this something that kind of like dovetails with some of the churches within, people's area? Can they get in touch direct with you? How do they kind of like go about getting to know a little bit more about this and perhaps get,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a website with lots of resources, and the main thing that we offer is the audit, which is basically it goes through 5 steps, so 5 areas of church life, and churches can go through and you can see what you're already doing well to welcome and include single people, and maybe just some areas that you haven't thought about before. And if people are single, then we have a map of single friendly churches on our website as well, and we're hoping that as more churches do the audit, that we'll be able to have lots of churches on the map, and people will be able to find a single friendly church in their local area.
So is your face off, Beth, mainly with the churches then, or do you get involved with some of the people that are wanting to find a church, that is perhaps single friendly? Is it both?
It is both. We used to focus more on helping single Christians, but then we realised that actually to make effective change, we really needed to be speaking to the churches and church leaders. So that's now where we focus most of our energy and resources on kind of raising awareness of the need to include single people, because lots of people are just still very much focused on families, and they don't realise that actually, you know, as I said, 40% of UK adults are single, and it's not just young people; it's people of all ages and stages of life, including single parents, people who maybe previously been married, and raising awareness that this is something we need to be talking about. And then, you know, as I said, giving practical tips for actually making a difference in your local church.
So when you're talking to some of these churches, you know, the vicars, the priests, etc., the reception presumably and reaction to it has been really quite positive, I assume. I mean, I'm guessing it's probably stuff that maybe they hadn't even thought of themselves beforehand, and are quite thankful for your expertise, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly since the pandemic, I think a lot of people realised and were kind of woken up to the fact that not everyone is in a family. You know, we had the kind of single households and single parents, and also when people started to come back into church before we had when we had social distancing, people would sit in their households, and you could actually stand on the front of the stage and look out and see how many people were actually sat by themselves, and it showed you just how many people come to church on their own, even if they might be married, but maybe their spouse or partner doesn't believe, and so they're actually coming to church as a single person in church, even if they're married outside of the church.
It's still quite a strange time, isn't it? Don't you think, with regards to the fact that we're coming through COVID? Because I remember, you know, when lockdowns were on, and a lot of these churches will have launched Facebook Live, you know, for their services. And I've got to be honest, I've not really fully returned to church yet. Really, I'm still doing it on Facebook Live, believe it or not. And I think that's probably just still a little bit of fear, time. You know, it's become kind of like, I suppose, in some ways more convenient. Do you think that landscape has changed, is changing? How do you think it's moving forward?
It has changed. I think there are a lot of churches that still are online, and I think I read an article this week about how people have returned to church less, or they don't see that the Sunday morning gathering is as necessary a part of their faith as maybe it used to be before the pandemic. But I think that it means that church is more accessible, and if you can't go one week, you can still kind of stay in touch and stay involved. But I think one thing that church is so important for is about you know, the social life, the community, being with each other, kind of worshiping together, and being in a church family that supports one another. So, you know, I think it can be difficult for people who maybe are nervous to go back to church, particularly if they're isolated on their own, because they do need that community and they do need that family.
That's just such a good point, really. That's something I was talking about earlier on in the week. Really, is that kind of that social side, isn't it? Really, that you miss out on by just being you know, on a camera. It's that bit, that aspect that you miss out on with that kind of like social contact, teas and coffees and biscuits afterwards and stuff like that. You know.
Absolutely. And we find that that's actually one of the ways that you can make church more single friendly, is to really focus on, do you have a contact point after the service or before the service where people can meet each other? Because otherwise it's very easy just to turn up by yourself and sit there, and then as soon as the service is finished, disappear, and actually you haven't built any relationships or built any community.
Sure. Anyone listening to this, Beth, just to do a recap, and they've come in late perhaps, and they need kind of like some direction, pointing in the right direction with regards to who to talk to and how to make their church a little more single friendly. Where can they go? Can you just give us those website addresses again?
Yes, so you can look us up at singlefriendlychurch.com, and we're on all the social media as well at Single Friendly Church. And we've actually just done a webinar for church leaders, particularly focusing on this issue of Christmas and how to make your church services more inclusive, and kind of including single people in all aspects of church life. So that's on our YouTube channel.
Brilliant. You all sorted for Christmas? Done your shopping?
No, not yet. I've watched my first Christmas film, but that's about it so far.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're creeping in even earlier now, aren't they? The films, and I can see all the signs going up for Christmas light switch-ons and stuff like that. It does get earlier and earlier. My wife went out yesterday and sorted out the Christmas meal. So we've got
That's amazing.
yeah, I know. It's the first time she's ever been quite so organized. Incredible. I almost fell over, Beth.
Well, yeah, I haven't even, it's not something that I usually think about until maybe a couple of weeks before Christmas. So I'm very impressed.
Do you still write cards to people? Do you send cards to people?
That's actually something that I got back into during the pandemic. I think I started to I made it one of my New Year's resolutions to become a birthday card person. So I started sending birthday cards to my friends and kind of family. And I just thought that was a really lovely kind of way of keeping in touch and helping people to feel loved. And so last Christmas, actually, I sent a load of Christmas cards. And it's a good way of kind of, I think, keeping in touch with people maybe who you don't speak to on a regular basis and show them that you're still thinking of them. So I quite like to do that.
Yeah, I think I'm turning into Mr. Scrooge. I'm already telling my daughter, actually, don't worry about it. It costs money. Just say Happy Christmas to them. But that's me. That's Mr. Grump.
Well, absolutely. I used to be like that, to be fair. So,
Well, it's a lot lovely speaking to you. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we know where to go for all that information now. And happy Christmas to you. I'll be the first to say that to you potentially.
oh, thank you. Well, happy Christmas to you too.